Okay, so today we are looking at solving quadratic equations algebraically. So we're actually finding a value for x. So up until this point, we've seen quadratics but without an equal sign. They've just been expressions. They haven't actually equaled anything, and we haven't given a value to x. So that's what we're going to start doing today. The easiest way to solve is using what we call the null factor law, which, as it says here, it states that the product of two numbers, if the product of two numbers is 0, then one or both of the numbers has to be 0, because we know that if we multiply anything by 0, it's 0, right? So the only way something can equal 0 if it's being multiplied is if it's being multiplied by 0. So if I have two brackets that look like this in our first example, one of those brackets must equal 0. So say this first bracket equals 5, this second one must be 0 for the whole equation to equal 0, because I would have 5 times 0. So given that theory, what we actually do is we sort of break these two apart into two separate equations, and we make the bracket equal 0. So I'm going to have x minus 7 is equal to 0, and x plus 11 is equal to 0, following the theory that one of them must equal 0. So then I solve for x using my inverse operations, which you should have done last year. Give me a nod if you sort of remember solving for x last year. A few uncertain looks. Okay, so I'm going to go over it as if you've never done it before. We're doing the thing where we're doing something to both sides. So if I have x minus 7 and I want to get that x by itself, can someone suggest to me what I'm going to do with that 7? Good, I'm going to plus 7 to both sides. So plus 7, and just as a reminder, the reason I'm doing that is because I want to cancel out this minus 7 on my left side so I can get x by itself, so I'm moving that 7 over to the other side. So I'm plussing 7 to both sides, which means the plus 7 and the minus 7 are going to cancel out, and I'm just going to be left with x on the left side. 0 plus 7 is just 7. So that means one of my solutions for this equation is x equals 7. But I can also have a different solution. With quadratics, more often than not, we have two solutions. Sometimes you can have one, sometimes you can have none. But for this particular equation, we have two. So looking at my x plus 11, what am I going to be doing to both sides to get x by itself? Take away 11. Good. So 11 minus 11 is 0, so they cancel out to leave me with just x. And then on the other side, 0 minus 11 is negative 11. So my two solutions for x are negative 11 and 7. I tend to write them in numerical order, but it's not the most important thing. Okay, moving on to our second example. With this example, to use our null factor law, we have to factorize first. We can't use it if we don't have the two brackets happening. So we need to factorize first. Can someone suggest to me a way in which we can factorize this? Charlotte? Fantastic. I'm going to take out a common factor. Charlotte, what is my common factor? X. Good. So I'm going to factor out my x, and I'm going to get x minus 3 left in the bracket. Now, I obviously do not have the two brackets that I had last time, but I still have a bracket and an x on the outside. So when we have an x just floating there on the outside, that immediately tells me that that factor could be that x equals 0. The solution for that particular one would be that x is equal to 0. With the bracket, we are doing the same thing that we did last time. So we're going to have x minus 3 is equal to 0. Someone shout out to me what we're going to do to both sides to get x by itself. Plus 3. Fantastic. So I'm going to plus 3 to both sides. X is equal to 3. So my two solutions for x are 0 and 3. Looks like a few of you are done. So, Fiona, explain to me what you did for this one.
Take the 3 out. Becomes 3.
Great, so we're taking the 3 out, and then what we have left in the bracket is x squared minus 9. Then what do we do? Great, because we have two squared numbers. 9 is a square number. We have a difference of 2 squares. So then how did you factorize the difference of 2 squares?
X plus 3 and x minus 3.
Great. Okay, and now we have to apply the null factor law. Now, that 3 on the outside, you're going to leave it. It's just the 3. It does not have an x with it, which means you cannot apply your null factor law to it. That can only be applied when you're trying to solve for some value of x. So I'm going to focus specifically on this x plus 3 and x minus 3. So I'm making x plus 3 equals 0. So x is going to equal negative 3 because I'm minusing 3 from both sides. You don't need to give me the arrows in your working. I'm happy for you to just give me that. And then you have x minus 3 is equal to 0. So x is going to equal to 3. So your two solutions are negative 3 and 3. Caitlin, do you want to tell me what you did for C?
So I put into two brackets, so one was x takes 6, the other was x takes 7.
Great, so your factors were negative 6 and negative 7?
Yeah.
And you factorize it into x take away 6 and x take away 7. Fantastic. So what did you get for your solutions of x?
X equals 6.
Great. So I'm making this one x minus 6 equal to 0. So x is equal to 6. And x minus 7 equal to 0. So x is equal to 7. So my two solutions are 6 and 7. Now, for this final one here, I'm actually going to do that one on the calculator. So could you all pull out your calculators just so I can remind you how to solve on the TI? Okay, so you've all got your calculators open. Now go into calculate or open a calculator, whichever one you prefer. Then we're clicking into menu. You're going to come into algebra and then click solve. So let's type in D, which is 36x squared minus 21x is equal to 2. Now, after you've typed in your equation, don't forget to put comma x. You need to tell it what to solve. And then just press enter. So it's given you two values. We've been getting two values up until this point, so you want to write down both of these. Don't pick one, but write both. Okay, so with this particular one, do I have 0 on the other side of the equal sign? No, so what do I need to do? I need to take away 2 from both sides. So I'm going to have 36x squared minus 21x minus 2 is equal to 0. I can only use the null factor law if my equation equals 0. So now let's factorize. I need to find two factors that multiply to negative 2 times 36 which is negative 72, and I need two factors that add to negative 21. So 36x squared minus 24x minus plus 3x minus 2 is equal to 0. Factorizing that, what's my common factor with 36 and 24? What's my highest common factor? X and what? Yes, let's swap them around. So 36x squared, you want to swap them? Plus 3x minus 24x minus 2. So common factor between 36x squared and 3x is 3x. So I'm going to factor out 3x. So that's going to leave me with 12x plus 1. And then my common factor between 24x and 2, I'm going to take out negative 2. And I'm going to be left with 12x plus 1 is equal to 0. Factorizing that, I've got my two same brackets, which means I'm going to take that's going to be my common factor. So I'm going to have 12x plus 1, and then my bracket with the leftovers. Now I can apply my null factor law, now that I've finally got there. So I'm going to do this one in yellow, bringing that over here. I've got 12x plus 1 is equal to 0. Charlotte, can you solve this one for me, please? Great. Step me through it. Okay, so we minus 1 first. So we're going to, if we divide by 12, we're going to have to divide that 1 as well. So I'm going to move that 1 to the other side first. So I'm going to minus 1 from both sides. 12x is equal to negative 1, and then I'm going to divide by 12. So x is equal to negative 1 over 12, which is consistent with one of our solutions that we got on the calculator. And in green, I'm going to do my other one over here. 36x minus 2 is equal to 0. Stephen, can you do this one for me? Great, so I'm plussing 2 to the other side. And then? Great, so I'm dividing by 3, so x is equal to 2 over 3. These are my two solutions. Now, we can also solve by completing the square. Already volunteered. So Josh, take it away. Okay, Tess, go for it. Great, so I'm taking the b term, which is this 2 here. 2 over 2 all squared. Great. 0. Fantastic. These three make a perfect square. Great, and the 1 comes from this bracket in here. 2 divided by 2 is 1. Great. Equals 0. Yes, and then we have a difference of two squares situation, or we want to force a difference of two squares situation, because obviously 5 is not a squared number. So the way around that, if I have x plus 1 squared minus the square root of 5 squared, that effectively gives me 5, because square root and squared is the opposite. So I'm sort of forcing the situation. So then I get x plus 1 minus the square root of 5 and x plus 1 plus the square root of 5. So the same thing I do when I have a difference of two squares, but chucking that square root on that number when it's not a squared number is how you find your way around it. Okay, so now we're going to use the null factor law. So taking my first bracket, the x plus 1 minus root 5 equal to 0. All I'm going to do is plus that square root of 5 to the other side. So I'm going to plus square root of 5 to both sides. And as I said, you don't have to give me the arrows on the side. They're just for you to follow along with me. So x plus 1 is equal to the square root of 5. And then I'm going to minus 1 from both sides to get rid of this positive 1 over here. So then I'm going to have x is equal to the square root of 5 minus 1. So that's one of my solutions. You're not always going to get a nice, neat solution without a surd. Sometimes you are going to get a surd. Okay, taking my other bracket and applying the null factor law, x plus 1 plus the square root of 5 is equal to 0. Alex, do you want to solve it for me? Yep, great. So I'm going to minus the square root of 5. So I've got negative square root 5. And then minus 1. Good. So I've got x is equal to negative 1 minus the square root of 5. Sorry, other way around. Great. So these are my two solutions for x when I'm completing the square. And lastly, this worded problem, I'm going to give you a couple of minutes to read through it and work it out, and then we'll come back and talk about it. Okay. So, two consecutive numbers are multiplied together and you get 20. You need to determine the numbers. So, what you need to do is define your variable. You can't solve without a variable. So, I'm going to say that my first number, if you want to do A and B, let's pick A. My first number is going to be A, which means that my second number, and I don't want to use another variable because at the moment I don't know how to solve for two variables at one time. I need to write my second number using my letter of the first number. So say, for example, my first number was 4. Right, good. I add 1 to get my consecutive number. So my second number is going to be A plus 1. Then I'm going to write myself an equation. So they are my two numbers are multiplied together. So I'm going to have my first number multiplied by my second number, which means I'm going to have A times A plus 1 is equal to 20. Or we can write it like this without the times. A times bracket A plus 1. Now, what do I do? Yes, we can minus 20. Because I'm probably going to have to use the null factor law at some point, given that that's what we're doing. So I'm going to minus 20. Okay, so I've gotten to this point. Now I said we expand the brackets. So I have A squared plus A minus 20 is equal to 0. A lot of people could identify that their factors were negative 4 and positive 5, which is correct. So I have A minus 4 and A plus 5 is equal to 0. Applying my null factor law, this bracket is going to get me that A equals 4, and this bracket here is going to get me that A is equal to negative 5. That does not mean that my two numbers are 4 and negative 5. That means that my two solutions for A are 4 and negative 5. That's not my answer. So that means that I have two situations where this is correct. So what I'm going to do is take my first situation where my first number is equal to 4, which means that using my second number equation of A plus 1, I'm then going to substitute my 4 into that one. 4 plus 1 is equal to 5. So that's my first scenario where this worded question, I get my two numbers. Now I take my second scenario where my first number is equal to negative 5. And then I'm going to substitute it into my second number equation, A plus 1, where I get negative 5 plus 1 is equal to negative 4. So this is my second scenario where it's correct. So you have two scenarios.